In the heart of Cronum, where steel and glass skyscrapers kissed the clouds, there stood a peculiar little shop, tucked inconspicuously between two towering buildings. Its faded wooden sign read, "The Timekeeper's Haven." To the bustling crowds that passed by, it seemed little more than an outdated clock repair shop, lost amidst the neon-lit brilliance of the modern city. But inside, the shop held secrets that could unravel or mend the very fabric of reality. Elias, the shop's proprietor, was an elderly man with a quiet air of wisdom. His silver hair framed a face marked with lines of experience, and his hands, though calloused, moved with the precision of a master craftsman. Every clock in the shop, be it a grand, intricately carved grandfather clock or a tiny brass pocket watch, was connected to the timeline. Each tick was a heartbeat of history, and each talk was a moment of the future. For years, Elias had worked alone, tending to the world's hidden balance. He was the last of the timekeepers, a dwindling order sworn to safeguard the flow of time. But on a stormy evening, the quiet sanctity of his shop was broken. Door swung open with a jangle of bells, and two strangers entered, both drenched from the torrential rain. The first was a young woman with chestnut hair plastered to her face, her green eyes wide with desperation. In her hands, she clutched a broken pocket watch. "Please," she gasped, her voice trembling, "you have to fix this." Behind her stood a man, tall and lean, his dark hair slicked back. His sharp, calculating eyes scanned the room, lingering on the clocks that lined the walls. In his hand was a strange humming device that emitted a faint, rhythmic pulse. Elias rose slowly from his workbench, his gaze shifting from one visitor to the other. "Can I help you?" The young woman stepped forward, holding out the watch. "This belonged to my grandmother," she said. "It's been in my family for generations, but today it just stopped, and when it did, everything felt wrong." Elias took the watch, his brow furrowing as he examined it. The intricate gears inside were frozen, and a faint, unnatural glow pulsed from its center. His heart sank. "This isn't just any pocket watch," he murmured. "It's a Nexus clock." The man stepped forward, curiosity and concern mingling in his expression. "A Nexus clock?" he echoed. Elias glanced at him. "And who might you be?" "Kieran," the man replied. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, like someone accustomed to danger. "I found her outside, trying to figure out what was wrong. I thought I could help. I know what happens when time falls apart." Elias studied Kieran for a moment, noting the device in his hand. It radiated the same energy as the Nexus clock, though its design was unfamiliar. Finally, Elias nodded. "Follow me," he said. He led them to a hidden chamber at the back of the shop. Shelves lined with ancient tomes loomed over maps that shimmered faintly, showing the ebb and flow of time itself. Elias placed the Nexus clock on a pedestal, its glow illuminating the room. "This clock is tied to the timeline," Elias explained, turning to Mira and Kieran. "When it stops, it means something has gone wrong in the past, something significant. If we don't fix it, the timeline could unravel." "What kind of something are we talking about?" Kieran asked, his tone skeptical but intrigued. "A pivotal event in history," Elias replied, "one that altered the course of time itself. To repair the timeline, someone must use the Nexus clock to travel back and set things right." Mira paled. "Why me?" she whispered. "The Nexus clock chose your family long ago," Elias said gently. "Its connection to you is no coincidence. You are tied to its power, in ways even I don't fully understand. Mira hesitated, fear flickering in her green eyes, but before she could speak, Kieran stepped forward. "She won't be going alone," he said firmly. Elias raised an eyebrow. "And how do you propose to accompany her?" Kieran held up his device. "This is a temporal beacon. I built it to track disruptions in time. It can synchronize with the Nexus clock. Together, we'll have a better chance of solving whatever went wrong." Elias regarded him for a moment, then nodded. "Very well," he said, "but tread carefully. The timeline is fragile and every action has consequences." With the Nexus clock repaired, Mira and Kieran stood side by side, their resolve growing despite their uncertainty. They activated the clock, and a blinding light engulfed them. They emerged into a bustling marketplace, centuries in the past. The air smelled of spices and freshly baked bread, and merchants shouted over one another, hawking their wares. "Where are we?" Mira asked, clutching the Nexus clock tightly. "Judging by the architecture, somewhere in the late 1500s, Kieran said, studying their surroundings. His temporal beacon beeped softly, pointing toward a stall where a young inventor tinkered with a peculiar device. "That must be him," Mira said. The inventor was a wiry man in his 20s, his face alight with excitement as he worked on a machine that pulsed with energy. Mira and Kieran approached cautiously. "Excuse me," Mira said gently. "What are you building?" The man looked up, startled. "It's a device to harness time itself," he said proudly. "With this, we can control our destinies." Kieran frowned. His beacon buzzed erratically, warning of instability. "If this thing activates, it'll tear the timeline apart," he muttered. Mira stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. "You want to make the world better, don't you? What if this doesn't work the way you hope? What if it causes more harm than good?" The inventor hesitated, doubt flickering across his face. Kieran pulled out the beacon. "This shows what happens if your device goes unchecked. Look." The inventor's eyes widened as he saw glimpses of chaos, fractured time, cities crumbling, people fading into nothingness. "I don't want this," he whispered. "Then help us," Mira said. "We can modify it together." With the inventor's cooperation, they adjusted the machine, ensuring it would stabilize time rather than disrupt it. When the device hummed to life, the Nexus clock in Mira's hand glowed brightly, signaling their success. Back in Elias's shop, the storm had cleared and the clocks ticked in harmony. "You've done well," Elias said as Mira and Kieran returned. But before they could celebrate, the Nexus clock glowed faintly again. "This isn't over, is it?" Mira asked. Elias shook his head. "No, this was just the beginning. The timeline will always need protectors." Mira and Kieran exchanged a look, determination in their eyes. "Then we'll be ready," Mira said. And so, the Timekeepers gained 2 new heroes, united by fate and bound by their shared mission to safeguard the fragile balance of time